Since League of Legends launched in 2009, there have been countless champions released that were seen as poorly designed, either for being too weak, too strong, or too annoying to play against. But there is only one single champion, released in 2022, that was so broken that the champion's designer actually apologized for her creation. And that champion is Zeri.
You look at these champs and what are they supposed to do? Like, he's trying his best to get on top of her.
I don't know. Is he?
How do you get movement speed, bro?
Like, I don't know. Is he playing
so
well?
Zeri ultimately just
like,
have to run away?
Is
Is that what
fair?
it is?
I can't auto her.
Is he playing well, or
Wow.
is this just not fair?
Wait.
I can't,
Wait.
bro.
Wait, guys.
Zeri would become such a nightmare that within months of her release, players were already begging for Riot to remove her from the meta. But removing her from pro play in particular turned out to be a very difficult thing to do. Even while receiving back-to-back nerfs at a speed never before seen by Riot, Zeri was still pick or ban in almost every single game. If you go look at her patch notes, it feels like you're scrolling through a full novel. If you played League back when Zeri released, you're probably having flashbacks to this. If you didn't play League back then, you're probably wondering how Riot let this happen. This video is going to cover the story of Zeri, and the legacy of one of the most broken combinations in League's history. But before we talk more about Zeri, let me introduce you to this video's sponsor and official partner of Riot Games, Opera GX. Opera GX has worked with Riot to prepare real-time loot drops for viewers who will be watching the World's 2025 Finals live on lolesports.com. Look out for a special Opera GX notification on screen. When you see it, click it and you'll get a free Hextech chest and key if you're viewing using their browser. If you don't already have it, you can use my download link below. But that's not all. They even have an official Riot Corner, which includes a schedule for all major events. It even shows official co-streams and a bunch of League themes you can download and try out. If you want to check out the Riot Corner feature, you can download one of the official League of Legends mods to automatically get access. Or if you're too lazy, it comes pre-installed using my link in the description below. No need to worry about the stress of swapping browsers and losing your bookmarks, because Opera GX is a feature to import all of your settings from your old browser. Just go to Browser Settings, then Synchronization, then click Import Bookmarks and Settings. Outside of the League collaboration with Riot, there's plenty of other features, like a built-in ad blocker and VPN. You can get 2 months of VPN Pro for free using the code EarnYourLegacy in Opera GX on their website. If you'd like to try out Opera GX and use one of the official League-themed mods, you can use my download link below. Thank you again to Opera GX for sponsoring this video, and let's jump back into it. Zeri's announcement trailer was, overall, well liked by the community, but they had no idea what was coming. Zeri's design was very unique. She was intended to be an ADC that relied on and rewarded having good aim. They wanted to bring the feeling of an FPS to League, and as a result, they made her auto attack a skill shot. Her passive stole the active shielding of opponents that she damaged, applying a portion of the shield to herself instead. Plus, anytime she gains shielding of any kind, her movement speed increased. Zeri's Q is the replacement for her basic attack. It's a skill shot that fires a barrage at the enemy, scaling with attack speed, crit chance, and applies on-hit effects. Her actual basic attack was now an ability that applied spell effects, like slows. This basic attack ability would charge as she moved or used her Q, dealing more damage and slowing when fully charged. Zeri's W is a skill shot that deals damage and applies a slow, but when the pulse is aimed through terrain, it basically turns into a Lux ultimate. Oh, and it dealt magic damage, because of course the champion building attack damage items would also have the ability to one-shot you with magic damage. Zeri's E is, of course, a dash. Then her next 3 Qs would also pierce, damaging all enemies instead of the first one hit. Anytime Zeri attacks or uses an ability on an enemy champion, the cooldown is reduced. It could also be used across any terrain, like Talon's E, and she could also cast her Lux Ultimate W while mid-dash. And finally, Zeri's ultimate. It dealt AoE damage, and hitting an enemy champion would grant overcharge, boosting attack speed up to 40%, adding 30 on hit damage, and a chain effect on every Q. That's not all though. Overcharge stacked infinitely, providing increased movement speed with each stack. Each attack or ability landed on an enemy, added a stack, and also extended the duration, and this was definitely very balanced and caused no balance issues at all. You might find it hard to believe, but when she released, the general sentiment in the community was that Zeri was a very balanced, fair champion. This is what Riot August had to say when talking about her right after her release.
If you're coming in here saying like, yeah, Viego was so dumb, but Zeri, oh, she's so fair. Thank you, August. I'm gonna tell you I'm worried. I'm worried the Zeris that you're running into in game right now are just bad. I'm worried that this character is very good and maybe a little crazy, and you might just be running into bad Zeris.
The idea that she was balanced did not last long. See, when a champion releases with over a 50% win rate, it's a good signal that something is not right, because players haven't even had a chance to learn the champion and are already winning most of their games. That was exactly the case with Zeri, and her strength is really reflected in her ban rate. While she was intended to be an AD carry and was supposed to build AD carry items, she was actually building bruiser items. Trinity Force synergized perfectly with her Q, triggering Spellblade. Each hit of her Q barrage also applied the armor shred from Black Cleaver, and also triggered Titanic Hydra too. Zeri wasn't just ultra mobile, she was also tanky due to building bruiser items. Being incredibly strong in solo queue was a pretty small problem overall though, because she completely dominated pro play. In the LCS Spring Split, which began shortly after Zeri's release, she was pick or ban for the entire split. Out of 92 games, she was picked or banned in 91. Keep in mind that before the split had even started, Riot had already nerfed Zeri 3 times. Whenever an ADC is this good at kiting, especially with as much range as Zeri had, it becomes very difficult to find a way to balance her. Pro players are so mechanically skilled at the game that they can get a lot more value out of a kit that allows for a literal infinite amount of kiting. Because Zeri was so ridiculously good in pro teams, they nerfed her again in a hotfix, making it her 4th nerf in one split. The good news is that Riot did succeed in nerfing her enough that players were incentivized to build crit in order to deal enough damage. But it really didn't matter. Things only got worse. Zeri had received so many nerfs that she was very weak in solo queue, falling below a 45% win rate. Normal players in a solo queue environment just couldn't find success with her. Riot had to try to find a way to balance Zeri, and for the first time since her release, they actually buffed her, in patch 12.11. This probably sounds very strange, considering what an issue she had been since her release. Why buff her now, especially when the community was already tired of her? Well, in that very same patch, they released a new skin for Zeri too, so suddenly that makes a lot more sense. These buffs to Zeri actually made her so strong that her solo queue win rate went from being as low as 45% to hitting 54% on the first day. This patch buffed most of her kit except for her ultimate, which was slightly nerfed. The weirdest change was that they made it so her Lux ultimate, her W, always crit when going over terrain. This created many situations like this one.
They're gonna end mid.
Zeri could just throw out her W constantly, and if it ever landed on someone, then the fight was basically over and the enemy team just couldn't contest the objective. The very next day, after collecting that sweet skin money, Zeri was again hotfix nerfed. And in the next 2 months, she received 4 more nerfs for good measure. Despite all of this, Zeri still crushed in the summer split. She was the most contested pick again, and to be clear, this was across multiple regions. There are a few factors that made it so that Zeri was impossible to balance in both pro play and solo queue. The nature of her scaling extremely well throughout the game translated perfectly into pro play. No matter how weak she was made early or how poor her laning was, pro teams would just play to scale, let Zeri come online later in the game, and then completely dominate from there. In solo queue though, team comps aren't as clear and many players don't want to coordinate with their team. It doesn't matter if Zeri needs to scale throughout the game, people are going to play however they want. To make Zeri even remotely good in solo queue meant that she would be by extension so broken in the competitive scene that she would need to be hotfix nerfed immediately. For those keeping count, less than 9 months after her release, Zeri had been nerfed 10 times. And because she dominated the spring and summer splits, the player base was already exhausted from seeing her picked. At the same time, Riot was getting very nervous. See, Worlds 2022 was coming up, and the last Worlds tournament was completely dominated by one specific champion, which I intentionally didn't mention yet. But you knew this was coming. I'm talking about the Demon of League of Legends, the most controversial champion to ever be created, and Zeri's best friend. Yuumi. At Worlds 2021, before Zeri even existed, Yuumi dominated from the very first game.
Oh, okay! That's the first thing! Yeah!
Kana's chase.
Yeah.
This guy loves to play winning lanes. Oh no, it's a Yuumi again.
It's a disaster.
That thing scares me.
Can we get a remake?
The long, slow debate. There it is.
There's the Yuumi.
They think that perhaps Rogue would go for a first pick Yuumi here for
I think it's meta now, dude.
She appeared in over 95% of games, 80 out of 83 in total, and of those, she was banned in 65. Yuumi's weakness was that she wasn't strong early in the game and needed to scale into the game before coming online. That sounds familiar. This meant that Yuumi had to be very weak in solo queue. If she had a decent win rate in solo queue, it meant that when played on a coordinated professional team, she would be beyond broken. Wait, that sounds familiar too. Yuumi now had a partner who synergized with her perfectly. These two champions seemed tailor-made to be played together. Yuumi made Zeri even more safe, could heal her, and because she attached to Zeri unlike other enchanters, she benefited fully from all of Zeri's mobility. The only thing that could make Zeri's mobility even more obnoxious was Yuumi, and the only thing that could make Zeri's laning phase even more safe was Yuumi. Because of the high range of Zeri's Q, she could easily just sit in lane and collect farm while being entirely untouchable. This is exactly what would happen in professional play. On top of that, Yuumi's lack of counterplay meant that if the opponent picked Zeri Yuumi, there was next to nothing that could be done. Zeri would eventually come online and the game was doomed. Both of these champions had the same issue of being way too broken in pro play if they were even remotely viable in solo queue, and when played as a duo, this was magnified even further. So these champions had to be balanced around not only their own potential, but also the strength of their synergy. The real question was, if Yuumi destroyed Worlds 2021 without Zeri, what would she do to Worlds with Zeri? The potential for these two champions to annihilate the tournament led to Riot making a post in September, ahead of Worlds 2022, specifically addressing the issues with Zeri and Yuumi. In this post, they explained that Zeri's ability to endlessly scale her speed, poke with W, and have incredible map mobility with E just didn't provide many counterplay opportunities. No one could have expected that. Ultimately, they decided to take her out of the limelight until they could find a healthy direction. This is the Riot Games equivalent to your parents telling you the family dog went to live on a farm. In that same post, they also spoke about Yuumi, explaining she would be nerfed due to her synergy with Zeri. Riot was basically saying that they didn't really know how to fix these two champions, and had decided the best thing to do was intentionally over-nerf them to prevent them from being picked. But did it work? Did Riot finally manage to knock Zeri out of the meta and save the Worlds tournament? Well, at Worlds 2022, Zeri wasn't picked or banned in a single game. Riot had succeeded in taking Zeri out of the meta. But what about Yuumi?
Razork, flash, slam, just beating the hell out of him, but it ain't gonna work, because Yuumi's there to save the day. See if they can get Hilly again. There's no flash available. The boomerang blade comes out. The spell shield is beautifully timed. Upset. Both summoner spells to get away. Gumayushi, he's got his Yuumi locked and loaded. The ignite onto Wonder. That tree is going down. And now they'll knock down the last remaining tier 3 turret, the last remaining inhibitor. They'll find a little damage onto him. Yuumi ulti goes out, Humanoid's locked down, but time is ticking, and it ticks against Fnatic. The tanks are half health, the turrets are lower. They're both gone. Nexus exposed. T1 going in again. Humanoid's already down. They're trying to find a culling. They're not going to find anything. Fnatic will fall, and T1 takes it off.
At Worlds 2022, Yuumi appeared in 95% of matches, and had a 100% win rate in the 8 games where she actually made it through the ban phase. It's worth noting that while Yuumi was dominating the Worlds meta, she also had around a 45% win rate in solo queue. Yuumi was a problem, and not an easy one to fix. After the Worlds 2022 disaster, Riot nerfed Yuumi to take her out of the meta with the intent of reworking her in the following season. But they also reworked Zeri in December of 2022, because she was still in her over-nerfed, unplayable state. Not only was Zeri being reworked within the same year that she was released in, it was in the same calendar year. The patch notes said that Zeri's combination of long range, high move speed, and scaling damage gave her little to no weaknesses in pro play, and the goal was to give her counterplay. Her base stats were changed while lowering her range by 75 to make her less safe overall. The idea was that making her get in closer to deal damage would make her more likely to actually get caught. They also nerfed her AP ratios, because of course that was a thing.
Sweeper qui lui permet...
Her W now dealt physical damage instead of magic damage, and her E also received some adjustments. A lot of her power was shifted from her ultimate to her E to make her less ult reliant. Her ultimate was heavily nerfed. It still had the potential to be infinite, but now had 2 parts. She got stat buffs, which could last up to 2 seconds maximum on the first part. The second part, Overcharge, was the infinite stacking move speed. These stacks only lasted for 1.5 seconds. So if Zeri was hit by crowd control, or just couldn't keep stacking for any reason, she would lose all of her stacks and speed. So how did this rework pan out? Was Zeri finally balanced after a year of constant changes? Well, in solo queue, she jumped from a 43% win rate to a 50% win rate instantly. And the Rule of Zeri dictates that if she's good in solo queue, then she is completely broken in pro play. So, you already know what happened next. During the LPL spring split, Zeri appeared in 93% of series with a 60% win rate. Plus, she was again often played with Yuumi, who had already been nerfed. Players, casters, and viewers were exhausted. It had now been a full year of Zeri dominating pro play, then being nerfed and showing up in pro play anyway. Even after a rework, she was still a problem. So, Riot nerfed her again ahead of the summer split. However, Yuumi's rework officially launched in March of 2023. So, during the LPL summer split, this is what happened.
So the vast majority of the time we do.
No!
Okay, let's calm down. Yeah,
Okay.
Yuumi's back, everyone. Commiserations to you all.
And we'll see whether or not the Yuumi Zeri is as strong as it used to be.
In the first 35 games, Zeri was picked or banned in every game except for a single match. It was once again the Zeri and Yuumi meta. Every split she released, Zeri took over pro play in some form. And for over a year now, these two champions just kept popping up. Keep in mind that both of them received a rework, and even when one wasn't picked, the other one was. Riot had tried countless nerfs, 2 versions of each champion, and still couldn't find a way to make the characters balanced. Combining the two magnified this problem even more. They could have terrible solo queue win rates while still being the center of the meta in pro play. That's why, in June of 2023, mid-split, Riot had to admit defeat. Because of the balance difficulties, Riot announced they would no longer try to make the champions balance for solo queue. Instead, they decided to let both champions sit under a 50% win rate long term. They said that if the duo kept coming back anyway, then they would consider more drastic changes. They removed Zeri's passive interaction with shields completely, including the bonus movement speed when she was shielded. Her burst fire no longer triggered Spellblade, meaning that she could no longer build tanky with Triforce, because she had also started doing that again. Meanwhile, Yuumi received sweeping nerfs, lowering pretty much every heal, shield, or buff she had. With these changes, Riot had succeeded in removing Yuumi and Zeri from the meta, and pretty much everybody was happy about it. But would it last? Well, let's look at Worlds 2023. Zeri did show up, but only in 21% of games, and Yuumi wasn't picked or banned a single time. Yuumi and Zeri as a duo is easily the most hated combination to see in pro play, being much more disliked than any of the funnel duos ever were. While Yuumi is widely considered the most hated champion, Zeri is also one of the champions that was hardest to balance just based on her design. When a champion is so strong that players are begging the developers to take her out of the pro scene in the same year she came out, it really says a lot. Zeri was so hard to catch, dealt a ton of damage, and could last hit from so far away that there was no way to actually put her behind. And that's without even considering Yuumi. The community's dislike of Zeri was so intense that in November of 2023, not long after the decision to intentionally overnerf her, this is what Riot August had to say.
We don't seem to be interested in buffing her at the moment. Unfortunately, we do not like seeing her in pro play, and so we deliberately are keeping her very weak so that she does not show up in pro play. That's my bad. I screwed up on that character. If I had been a better designer, maybe Zeri would be more playable. Does Zeri make me depressed? Yes, she is my biggest failing as a champion.
August gets a lot of flame from the community, but he's someone who genuinely does care about the game. The fact that he even felt the need to apologize for what Zeri became shows just how much he cares. And at the end of the day, he's just trying to create interesting champions, even though it doesn't always work out that way. If People forget that August is responsible for designing some really cool fan-favorite champions too, like Vi, Jinx, Echo, and Jhin. While streaming, he often talks about game design and Riot's perspective on things, so a huge shout out to him for that. He doesn't deserve the flame he gets just for doing his job, so if you do check him out, please be kind. Back to Zeri and Yuumi. What happened after their nerfs? Well, if we fast forward to Worlds 2024, Yuumi was again completely absent. Zeri was picked only twice and never banned. Surprisingly, now she has about a 50% win rate in solo queue, but the fact that she's so rarely picked is probably a contributing factor. Yuumi, though, is a different story. These two have been some of the most difficult to balance champions that Riot has ever created, and anytime viewers see them picked, the reaction is usually something like this.
Yeah! Now we go Aphelios Lulu or what?
Hey, you took away his Azir and his Nico, but he's got a lot
Ah,
of different picks.
What? Oh no! Okay.
What is that? What is that?
Zeri, Yuumi.
No, no, not again, no, 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 no.
A little bit.
It's been 3 years of this.
But I'm curious, what do you think about Zeri overall? Do you think that she's a problem, or do you think it's how well she synergizes with the Demon Cat herself that's the real issue? And do you like to see either of these champions in pro play? Before finishing up, I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for supporting the channel. Every like or comment really does go a long way, and again, thank you for watching.